morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are, what time you are listening to this. My name is Winston, and today we have a great guest. Someone told me that every episode I always say amazing, so I'm changing it up this time. We have a great guest with us today, Steffen. From he's the CRO and co-founder of Dreamdata. Steffen, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you, Vincent. I'm doing good. As I said just before, it's freezing here in Denmark, so I would have loved to do this interview in in Jamaica instead.
Well, I mean, it doesn't show because you look very much relaxed. Unlike me, if I were there, then I would. You would definitely show that I'll be cool.
Panic. Cool.
All right, guys. So just to give you a bit about Steffen's background, he has held, well, as I mentioned, he's a co-founder, CRO for Dreamdata, which, to my understanding, and Steffen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's a platform, a marketing technology that allows the user, whether that's marketing leaders, business owners, CEOs, sales leaders, to really track the entire customer and buyer's journey. So not just necessarily from the point where they become a lead, but even during that research phase that happens, I guess you could call it pre-sales funnel, and how to track that entire process. Am I correct?
Yeah, pretty much. So I think we call ourselves a data platform, and in that sense, what the data platforms, the purpose we're trying to solve for is to describe B2B customer journeys. So what takes place when one company is buying a product from another company. So when you connect your data to Dreamdata, within a few hours, we've synced all your historical data across all the platforms that you use. And then we'll show you every touch of every account, and hopefully that will help you see what you should do more of and what you should do less of. So typical buyers are, marketers who want to prove their impact on revenue. Sales teams want to know what journey have they, like the account, the demo call they're sitting with, where's it coming from, what have they been reading, etc. But it's all about linking every touch towards closed won business for B2B companies.
All right, awesome. Well, definitely excited for this conversation, and because that's definitely what we're all about. So, Steffen, you have also held positions as country manager, head of marketing, COO, CMO, been an advisory board member for Nordic Startup Awards as well as Danish Crowdsourcing Association. So I wanted to put all of that in there as well, so people understand that you're not just another sales leader turned CRO, but you actually have the marketing background as well. So you understand both functions as well as being the leader of a company, being co-founder of Dreamdata as well.
Yeah, and I think that's it's an interesting topic, because you can be kind of, you can either be, believe you can be a CRO who is good at sales, or you can be a CRO who's good at marketing. And I fundamentally don't believe that you can be equally good at both things. So it's been really interesting for me, coming from a marketing background to, when we started out the company, I had to do all the demo calls and did all the sales myself. And then you start to respect more and more all the, that it's an actual craft to do B2B sales, and it's hard work, and it's a lot of follow-ups. And you don't want to be sending shitty leads to the salespeople, because then you're just wasting their time. So it's been a big learning experience trying to figure out what is the sales part of it. I used to just think I'd just send enough leads to the salespeople, then we would hit budget. But you start to notice that it matters who the leads are, whether they fit your ideal customer profile, and so forth.
But that's something very interesting that you mentioned, because one of the things, I mean, this wasn't even a part of one of the questions I wanted to ask, but it just flowed so nicely in the conversation. Talking about marketing and sales alignment, because just like you, or should I say, back then before you actually got exposed to the sales aspect, there are a lot of marketers that just believe that, well, we're just sending off leads to sales and that's it. And I think this is my personal opinion that marketers don't really have much of an appreciation and empathy for sales. And as you said, really how hard it is. And I think if that empathy was a part of, probably if you have a marketer that's doing sales for 30 days or 90 days just to experience what it's like selling, then it makes marketing and sales alignment a lot easier. So as the CRO of the company, how do you establish that marketing and sales alignment within Dreamdata?
I think I think that's one of the best advice you can give to B2B companies, to force the salespeople to walk into the marketing room or the marketing people to go into the sales room. In our company, we sit in the same room, so kind of there's this physical nearness, but it's about asking to communicate, to ask each other. Like if you're a marketer, go ask the salespeople which are the leads that you prefer to talk to, or if you're a salesperson, you could repeat it and say that customers always ask me this question, and if you tell the marketers that, they'll probably pretty quickly think about a piece of content that they can actually write to help you to answer that question. And that's like one of our best resources for the content we produce, is really talking with the salespeople and asking them what is the questions that you're consistently hearing, and then trying to build content that helps reply those questions that they see a lot. So I think it's absolutely great advice, as you say. Try to stretch roles, or do like tandems, or like go out and get drunk together, or whatever can make you talk more together. I think is a great advice.
Right. And let's not even play around. Let's just jump right into it. And just a quick warning for our listeners. This episode we're talking about marketing attribution. We're not talking about much else. It's just data and attribution. So if you're someone that gets offended by the word attribution, then this episode may not be for you, because I know it's a bit of a trigger for some marketers, which leads me into my next question, Steffen, where, for most marketers, brand is a big deal, where, attribution is not. And I think that's because brand is more abstract and harder to measure. Whereas when we talk about attribution, there are specific metrics attached to that. So in your opinion, how can marketers balance both the brand aspect of things with, attributing marketing activities to revenue?
I think that's a good question, and I agree with you. You occasionally see people like getting upset about attribution on LinkedIn and bashing attribution, etc. But I think I just think that's incredibly stupid, because essentially what attribution is about is trying to figure out what repeatedly works. And I want to win, so I want to understand what are the things we know about our current customers that we can use to attract new customers. So, for example, let me give an example, is that if one Google search ad campaign always starts a lot of new journeys for you, is it a good campaign to put more money into? It probably is. Is it valuable to know how long a customer journey is? Let's say it's 180 days. Yes, it's valuable to know that, because now that it's December, it's impossible to help start new journeys because time is already over. Does it help me in a demo call to actually have tracked that somebody downloaded 2 different ebooks and they read certain pages? Yes, it does. So I think I always say that people should think more about attribution as that it's much more about getting as many insights into the customer journey available as possible. Then you can apply an opinion afterwards, which is an attribution model. But essentially, if you apply any model to 5% of the data, it's going to be wrong. So it's much more about making sure that you collect as much data about every journey that you can, and then you can have the opinion afterwards, which is kind of first touch attribution model, or this webinar was important, and so forth. But for us, what we do at Dreamdata is we help people get all the touches that they have available sorted into a data model of every account. Whether you want to use that for attribution or just talking together between marketing and sales to look at with what are the touches, that's up to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely you have more?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do. So anybody not caring about understanding what are the touches that you consistently see in your successful customer journeys, I think that's just wrong. And in any case, it's about knowing more. It's a game of competitive advantages. And if you're saying, I don't care about the touches in my journeys, then I think you're not doing as well as you could be doing.
Right.
Now, coming back to your brand question, like I really don't see any contradictions between attribution or brand, if you want to call it that sharp. But any kind of brand campaign will still have different impact. It will still convert differently. So say you run 10 different brand focused campaigns, you'd still be able to monitor whether one of those 10 campaigns had a different impact on your pipeline than the others. So I think it's more a question of, run those brand experiments on your gut feeling, but then check your gut feeling up against hardcore data. And then you want to amplify, you want to scale the brand campaigns that leaves up an extraordinary positive impact on your business.
Yeah. And do you think there is a way to actually measure brand? Because I've often heard people say that, brand isn't something that you can measure and directly attribute to revenue. Not sure if you agree or disagree, but just in case you do, or you can, let us know if you do, how would you be able to measure that brand to know what touch points or what KPIs or aspects of that campaign to optimize?
So I think we would here definitions matter. So for you, what does brand mean then? Or what do you mean when you say if you have to be specific?
For me, for me, brand, how I look at brand is anything that builds somewhat of an emotional connection with your customer, your audience, whether or not it can be measured or not.
Yeah. So it's, even if we put aside if all this digital stuff and data stuff, I think you'd still be able to, if brand is an expression of activities and then how these activities are received, you can still write down a list of here are the 5 or 10 things we're doing to positively impact people's impression of our brand.
All right.
And then you can go and look at what is it that we're actually doing. And then you can start and you can write down at which date did we start this. And then you can start looking at, did the opinion, did the numbers, did the data change after we carried out this experiment?
Right.
So for me, brand is, you can say, a brand is activities, it's stuff that you do. And I don't believe you probably most likely always leave a trace after you perform certain activities. And then, some things can be proven with like hardcore data, and other things you have to trust your gut feeling about. And both things can have big impacts.
Yeah. So just to segue a bit, this is me speaking now to the CRO in you and not necessarily the co-founder. Well, I guess it could probably apply to the co-founder, but more the CRO. Let's let's say I'm a marketer or a marketer that works within an organization, right?
Yeah.
And they want to approach the CRO with a marketing campaign idea or initiative that they want to execute, and they want to convince the CRO to actually invest the budget in doing so. What business case do you believe they can make to get them the budget they need to actually do that?
So CROs care about pipeline and revenue generated. And what you need to do is that you need to prove a link between the marketing campaigns that you plan on doing and the pipeline that it will build and the deals that you will win. Whether you solve that with an attribution platform like Dreamdata, or you find somehow else to get, the hardcore facts in the hands of the CEO is, that's what you need to solve for. But I fundamentally believe that you should do marketing to produce revenue, essentially. So
Right.
that's my line of thinking around marketing. Others think more comms and brand creatives, as you say yourself. But I think you should, you're assigned a budget, and you have to use that budget in a way that most positively impacts your business. And like a simple explanation, like you did these Google search ad campaigns and you produced 10 deals, 10 opportunities, and you actually won 3 of those opportunities. That's a hardcore fact that you can go to the CRO and then say, hey, we succeeded with this last month. Should we try and put 10 or 20% more into this campaign next month? So you very closely invest money in marketing correlating with revenue. I think if there's anything CROs like is that they get more deals that they can assign.
One of the things you said, definitely that I agree 100%, is that marketing should definitely be tied back to some sort of business outcome such as revenue, because at the end of the day, it is an investment. And if it's not producing revenue, then it's really an expense at the end of the day, which is why most of the time when marketers or marketing can't show that ROI, marketing budget is the first thing that gets cut.
Exactly. So I think this is a critical point, that if you don't want to be the first ones to get fired in a crisis, or like have your budget sliced with 50%, then you need to have a proof that what you're doing is producing revenue. I don't think it's an unreasonable demand. So I think you better be proactive about it rather than reactive. I would just send a newsletter out today saying that whether you're actually giving your marketing budget for the next year, or you're being given the marketing budget for next year. And I think that depends on whether you actually have the data available to prove this is what you give me, this is what I'm going to produce, or you're just waiting for them to set your budget, and then you're trying your best to see what you can do with it.
I mean, that's a good line. So whether you're giving budget or being given budget, explain or elaborate a bit more on that.
Yeah, I just wrote a LinkedIn post today, so I'll just find it. But I think either the CFO, the management team trust you because you have some merits, you have data to back it up, and then you can come to them and say, this is my plan for next year. I expect to get this amount of money, and then I expect to produce this result. Then year on year, you can get more and more budget because you have proof and you have results to back that up. If you're not interested in data, if you're not interested in proving that you're impacting revenue, then you can count on the CFO just going and say, this is your budget for marketing. Right. I don't care about the result, and I'm going to fire you if things go wrong. So, and I think this is where marketers needs to understand how the company makes revenue. Like, if you produce a lead, how many of those leads become a marketing qualified lead? How many actually becomes opportunities created in your CM? How many of those opportunities that you end up winning were starting from marketing sources? And you need to take that responsibility. You cannot just, throw in some leads and then walk away. That's
Right.
when you're gonna start to be given a budget rather than giving a budget.
Right. So I guess what I would love to know then, because you mentioned that yes, that's if the CFO actually trusts you to give you that budget, or should I say, to allow you to determine what that budget should be. So what's your process then, if there is one? And this is probably a two-part question. The first part, what's your process for attributing or tying marketing's activities back to revenue? And secondly, what's your process for mapping the buyer's journey back to revenue to show that attribution when they're reporting to the CFO or any other C-suite level leader?
Yeah, just before, I'll just give you an example from one person I talked to today. In his company, they had a price per demo call produced by BDRs. They did not have a price per demo call produced by marketing. When we then started calculating the numbers, it turned out that he had half the budget, or he had to hit a demo call booked at half the budget of what a BDR could spend, in time and costs.
Right.
And that's when, marketing is not connected to actual business result. You end up in these stupid situations where you say, BDRs can spend $1,000 producing a demo call. Marketing can only spend $500 to produce a demo call. And that's stupid, because if it's a proof that you can spend $1,000 on producing a demo call through a BDR, marketing should be allowed the same thing. And
Right.
then I actually think that the CEO should just shut up, or the CFO should shut up, if marketing can prove that they're actually producing demo calls at the target cost per acquisition. And then I would actually say this company should scale whatever activity that can keep producing the demo calls that they can prove below what the BDR cost is.
Yeah.
Then you're not, then you don't have a set budget. You have a set target cost per acquisition, and then you can scale however much you'd like, as long as every acquisition stays below that target.
All right. And well, to get to the second question, do you have like a process for tracking? Well, I have several follow-up questions, but this is the first one. Do you have a process for tracking the buyer's journey?
Yes. So this is essentially what we solve with Dreamdata. We have every touch of every account. So that's typically we pull your CRM data, your marketing automation data, customer success data, your tracking data from your website. So anything that touches the customer journey is plotted into the same timeline in Dreamdata. So you can see if you put money into Google Ads campaign, you can see whether that produces MQL, sales qualified leads, and actual won deals. So it's, in that sense, it's easy for us because we have our product set up. If you take a step back from it, just, if you want to go down this, data-driven or digital path, then you just need to commit to leaving as many digital traces of your work as possible. So if your salespeople today are just, cowboys sitting with their own phone and calling the customers, you actually need to force them to use like a dialing software, whether that's Aircall or a HubSpot or whatever. You need to start making them produce digital traces of their work. The same thing if CS is just sitting in a message email, move them into Intercom or Zendesk and so forth. So you can actually go through your whole organization and see whether all our go-to-market activities actually leave digital traces or not, because that's step one in actually following the data.
Yeah. And the follow-up to that would be, what KPIs would you recommend marketers track at different stages of the buyer's journey? Because I don't believe it's just, well, we're going to track MQLs or SQLs. I mean, there are specific KPIs or metrics that you need to track at each stage. Probably you can give us an idea of what specific metric to track at what specific stage of the journey.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So particularly in B2B, where journeys are super long and every company doesn't have high velocity of deals that are closing every month. then you need to, invent a set of proxy metrics per every deal stage that is actually possible to track. So ultimately, you want to be tracking deals won and the revenue that they're worth. But if your company is not producing enough deals every month to actually act upon them, you want to take a step back and a step back and a step back. Typically in B2B, it's a good thing to track. I think demo calls is a good proxy metric. Can we get them into a sales conversation? Then the likelihood of people closing is, is bigger than if they don't book a demo call. If we don't even offer a demo call, maybe we want to just track people signing up to a newsletter and so forth. So I think I would look at it this way. What is the closest thing to actually won deals that you can both track and also be reasonably accountable for? And to me, that is typically, it's somewhere between marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads. So you cannot be responsible for the salespeople actually doing their craft of closing the deals. That's without your reach.
Right.
But at least you can be responsible for producing qualified accounts that look like your normal ideal customer profile.
Right.
And then I think as a component, you really need to understand how long your customer journey is from the first time somebody hear about you until they become a customer. Not just from the point of time when they actually convert as a lead. Because if you don't know, typically what we can see with our customers is that the time that people spend researching or lurking is pretty much the same time as they spend identifying. So let's say your from email sign up to deal one is 3 months. Then you can add another 3 months of just researching your brand and product, etc. Then you're looking at 6 months. And if you don't know that it's that long time that you're dealing with, then how do you know whether your activities are a success or not?
All right.
Like you cannot judge your ad campaign in the first month if you know the average journey is 6 months. So if you want to have any kind of idea whether it's a success or not, then you need proxy metrics that are fair to assume leads to revenue at a later stage. But you cannot judge it based on revenue in the first month if the average journey is 6 months. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Well, in terms of metrics, because to be honest with you, before Dreamdata, I would say it's almost impossible to track that journey, that research stage of the journey. But since you're able to with Dreamdata, what metric or what do you guys look for in terms of indicators that this may actually convert to an MQL?
So I can speak on my at the Dreamdata case. So I think the first thing you can do is you can get new people on your website. That's that's a very early metrics. People on website. Then they can sign up to your newsletter or download your ebook. That's still very, very far from revenue. I can see that also when we're offering our ebook as a lead ad on LinkedIn. It's still pretty damn long from downloading an ebook to becoming a customer.
Right.
So you want to progress them towards something that looks more like a sales conversation, which is a demo call or a free sign up to your product if you have that option. And even at that point, you still need to keep progressing. So that means involving more people from the company in the conversation. So you maybe need to set up some meetings with both the one that booked the demo, but then also like other usual stakeholders at the company. And then you kind of typically what we can see is that paid and organic is starting in most journeys, and then meetings are the one that actually wins the customers. And you kind of need all of those things. So I think people should look at their customer journeys and then think about what's the closest correlated things to revenue, and then build further and further away from there.
Yeah, and there's this talk on LinkedIn now that MQLs are dead. This is another 2-part question. First of all, I would love to know for you, what do you define as an MQL versus a SQL? Like, what differentiates the two? That's the first question. And also, why do you think it's important for marketers to track MQLs as well? Because most people just say, "Oh, you just need to track pipeline and revenue, and that's it. You don't need to worry about any other metric, because it's a waste of time."
Yeah, so I can tell you. So we have like 3 or 4 funnel metrics that we normally care about. We have MQLs, which we've defined as somebody who either books the demo or who signs up for the product. Then we work with a metrics called sales accepted lead, which means that a salesperson would actually say, yes, I'm going to spend my time on this account because it looks like somebody I could sell to within some months. And then we have the SQL stage, which for us is that you actually create a deal inside the sales pipeline. So it's like you can be whatever newsletter sign up, ebook download, but we only start really counting from when they sign up to the product or they book a demo. Then the next metric is that a salesperson actually looks at the account, accepts that this is something that is worth working on. And then, as they then have conversation, they can then move the deal into like a sales qualified lead, which is when they create an opportunity in the sales pipeline. And that's because they actually think that they can win the deal within like reasonable time. Now, coming back to the MQL discussion, I think MQL for me is the metrics that I derive by. And that's because you want something in marketing which is an expression of quality demand,
Right.
but it also needs to be within reasonable time of your activity. So meaning that, I could just find the metric here, but I think it's like from first touch to becoming an MQL with us is like 30, 40 days or something like that. So I need to have a feedback loop of whether my activities are working or not. And then I physically look at every MQL every month to see is it the right MQL. But if I were to wait until somebody became a sales qualified opportunity, I might have to wait 4 months or something like that. And I cannot wait 4 months to see what happens. So you need a stage that expresses a certain amount of quality, but also it gives you a feedback loop to adjust your activities before the year is gone.
Yeah, that's a very good point. How do you optimize? Because earlier in our conversation you mentioned about marketing being able to pass on qualified leads, or well, not qualified but quality leads to sales.
Yeah.
So I'm sure at some point you must realize that some of the MQLs aren't that acceptable. So how do you optimize that MQL, or what criteria do you use to optimize to say, well, we realize that 30%, for example, of the MQLs that we pass on to sales are actually accepted. How can we now increase that number to 35 or 40? Do you have like some criteria or some process that you use for that?
Yeah, so the ultimate expression of quality is that that they go on and become sales accepted or even sales qualified, or won deals. And those are the deals you should start at looking at. What is the common denominators between the deals that actually go very far in the pipeline? And you want to look at what are the first touches that they have. If you can find repeatable activities there, then you go back and you try to scale them. So it could be like the landing page is a particular piece of content that starts a lot of journeys. Then you want to see, can I rank this piece of content better in Google? Can I write more on it? Can I insert a video so people spend more time on the page, etc., to try and improve the ranking? Or can I write something similar to this topic that seems to be producing deals? So it's basically going through all the MQLs, see if they match the ICP, that the ideal customer profile that you guys have agreed about in your team, and then try to qualitatively analyze what are the repeatable patterns here. Obviously, if direct as first touch, it's pretty impossible to do anything. But if it actually stems from some kind of marketing sourced activity, then you can actually go back and, in your team talk about how can we do more of this thing that seems to consistently be producing deals that the salespeople like.
Yeah, makes sense. And all right, so let's say as a head of marketing, CMO, I've done all of that of what we've spoken about so far. So I've optimized my deal flow, my sales process, buyer's journey.
Yeah.
We're delivering good revenue, we're delivering good MQLs. Now, in terms of that revenue growth, what levers would you recommend, like a marketing leader, focus on as growth levers to actually drive revenue growth? So, well, let's say they go to the CFO. The CFO agrees that to that increase in budget. How should they now spend that budget in terms of what growth levels to drive revenue growth?
So I think first of all, this needs to be aligned throughout the company. So if we're looking at 2022, then you need to have kind of what is the revenue target that we're trying to attain next year, and which role is each department gonna play. So if it's doubling revenue, then you need to understand how many new opportunities do you need to create to actually have a realistic chance of hitting that budget. And to produce opportunities, there's probably a conversion rate between marketing qualified leads and opportunities. So you need to kind of reverse engineer it. So if the CEO or the investor says this is the target, then you need to break it down. And if you're in a place where you can say this is fucking unrealistic, then you need to tell the company that we cannot hit this target. But we do it ourselves. We want to consistently stay on this 10% month-on-month path. And when I'm looking at next year, I know that each channel needs to progress around 10% month-on-month. Right. And then I can go and say we need this budget. If the paid channel is to continue to produce this, I need more writers. I need a videographer, etc. But I think you need to start by listening to the company. What is the overall revenue target here? And then you need to break that down into just the classical deals won, opportunities won, sales qualified leads, marketing qualified leads, etc. And then you need to think hard about, is it actually realistic that we can contribute this? Or like what needs to happen if we were to contribute this?
Yeah, that's a good point. And let's say for 2022, because the new talk now amongst B2B marketers on LinkedIn is the dark social or dark funnel.
Yeah.
And of course, the talk is that it's not something you can directly attribute in terms of the dark funnel or dark social to revenue. Let's say a marketer wanted to make the business case. So probably they did some experimentation or some tests, towards the end of 2021 Q4, and they realized there's something there. How can they now make the business case to the CFO or the CEO to invest more in the dark funnel, dark social, to actually expand on scale what they're already doing?
Yeah. Again, I think first of all, I don't think there's any contradiction between data and dark funnel in general. I would always approach growth, demand, whatever you would call it, from a point of view is on where on the internet, where in the world can I find people who are most likely to buy my product? And then kind of you can say, then there's people who are in market right now, which you can determine as demand capture, maybe people are searching for a product. Then you can start looking there. That's typically your review platforms, G2, Capterra, etc. It's Google long tail Google search ads. So you can quite fast. You can actually cover those people who are actually in market, and then you build from there. And it's true, And again, you just want to understand where are people who are how do they look, the people you're trying to sell to? Where do they go? Which Slack channels are they in, etc., etc.? And then, some of it is very measurable, and other stuff you need to trust your gut feeling. And we do both things. Like we can see that there's certain ad campaigns that consistently produces demo calls. We want to scale these things, but it also makes sense for us to keep getting more reviews, because when we buy software ourselves, we just we look at the review platforms. So it's you want to apply common sense to this, and you shouldn't neglect stuff you cannot hardcore measure if it's logical that it's part of the buyer's journey. So, you could also set up interviews we actually do that. We do after sales interviews with our customers and ask them, where did you hear about us? What is the Dreamdata source for you? Did you have a good experience? What could we do better, etc.? And then you just try to scale all the activities that consistently gets mentioned. And I think those who then misunderstand the dark socialists, the ones that don't want to be accountable for any numbers, that they just say sales just come if we do stuff.
Yeah.
I think you should always be interested in trying to understand as much as you can with data. And then you also accept that you need to apply gut feeling, you need to apply common sense to the numbers as well, because you don't do B2B deals with a click on a Facebook ad. You do B2B deals with like the work of the salespeople, the review platforms, the PR, etc., etc., etc. So I think it's when people lose this common sense that then that's where it goes wrong.
Well, you made a very interesting comment just now in terms of marketers not wanting to be accountable to a specific metric. Why do you think that is? I don't know if you have any commentary on that, but why do you think that is?
I guess it's nice. It's nice to not be accountable for stuff. And you can just sit and chill all day and drink coffee or whatever. So I think it's wrong not wanting to be accountable for numbers, because again, when the crisis come, and it will come at some point, then you need to be able to have that proof that you're contributing in a valuable sense. And if all you have to show is that I think this works, but you have no data that proves it, then it's hard to keep your job. So yeah, that's pretty much how I see it. I think people likes that they can just be running by their own opinion. I just think it's wrong. It's a bad way of doing business.
Yeah, that's true. Which leads me to my final question, Steffen, is I want to close out with this.
Yeah.
There is the opinion that CEOs don't get marketing. So the solution is, well, my CEO doesn't get marketing, so I'm going to leave that company for another one where my CEO actually gets marketing. I won't necessarily give my opinion about that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts around that, first of all. And secondly, how can marketers actually prove their value or get CEOs to get marketing, if there's such a thing?
So I think in any job, you're responsible for your manager finding sense in what you do, and you need to teach them. You need to explain them. We are doing these things in my team, or I am doing these things because I think X, Y, Z happens. That's the first task. You need to explain yourself, and because it's a team sport. You cannot just sit in your own corner and then you do your own stuff. You need to explain, this is my story about why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right.
And then the story gets stronger if you then have numbers, if you have data that can back it up. And, if you've been preaching this for a year and the CEO never catches, or the CFO doesn't catch up, then maybe it's not a good place for you. But I have not worked with any CEOs that were not rational. So, start with the narrative. Why is it that we're doing the things that we're doing? Right. Then build data to it. So the next time he comes, you can say, remember the story I told you? Now we did this activity that led to X, Y, Z, and we produced X amount of revenue or X amount of deals. Should we do more or less of that? So it is. I think it's your responsibility as a market to be able to marketing, to be able to explain why are we doing these things. We're doing these things because we want to help the company, and we do help the company by X, Y, Z. So I think it's the marketer's responsibility at the end of the day. And if the CEO just never gets it, it's on to the next one. But it starts with you caring and not just saying that the CEO and the CFO wants the same thing as you. They want to have the company do well. So try to explain them why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I definitely agree 100%. And with that, any closing thoughts, Steffen? Anything else that you want to just add to this conversation?
No, it's been a pleasure, Vincent. I really wish we could have done it in person on Jamaica.
Well, one day, hopefully.
I hope
Thanks
so.
so much for taking time out to be here. If people need to reach you and connect with you further, where can they find you?
Yeah, it's definitely LinkedIn for me. So people can just connect and ask any question. And our website is dreamdata.io. So if people are interested, they can check out that.
Awesome. Steffen, thanks again so much. Take care. And this was a pleasure.
Big pleasure, Vincent.
This has been the Revenue Alignment Podcast. Join us next week where we have more amazing content to help you demonstrate, communicate, and prove your value at the C-suite level. I'm Winston, your host, and this is a wrap.